So, perfect. Okay. So there's a hand sign over there. Was somebody raising the hands just for the first question?
Oh, it was a selfie.
Oh, a selfie with a celebrity. I don't know if I'm such thing, but okay.
We have a tradition to start every meeting with a selfie.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. So today we want to talk about unleashing our full potential as a Scrum Master and or Agile Coach. And there was some interesting things going on today on Twitter. I will share later. But first, a few things about myself. Well, this is me, as you can see, kind of without the beard. This is here right now. And I'm certified as a Certified Scrum Trainer, a Certified Team Coach, a Certified Agile Leader, and past a CSP educator, blah, 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 blah. I've been around in the Agile way of working for about 18 years now, so it's kind of a while. And I have no idea. I would like to know something about you. So who of you is working as an Agile Coach or Scrum Master? Please raise your hand. Okay, almost all of you. Please just leave the hands open. And who of you is working as a Scrum Master for about 1 year? Okay, for about 2 years. For about 3 years. 5 years. 8 years. 10 years. Okay. Wow, but we have some very good experience in the room, so I have some experts here and I can learn from them as well, which is pretty nice. Okay, so let's see. And if you have any question, feel free to raise your hand. And if I'm hard to understand, just let me know, just by raising your hands weird or whatever. Just, yeah, just so that I can see it. Okay, so today there was a thing on Twitter where someone says, well, I'm kind of confused. Wanda Kustas just raised a question because she read an article on Agile Velocity, and she said, well, the Scrum Master and the Agile Coach both mentor, facilitate, coach, teach, make observations, and model behavior. So is one the Agile version of the other, question mark? And what I would like to do right now is please find a partner in the room or pair up with, build a triad with 3 and discuss from your perspective, what is the difference between an Agile Coach and a Scrum Master? Have a good conversation, about 2 minutes, and then we come back just to think, what are your thoughts about what is the difference between Agile Coaching and Scrum Mastering? You can stand up, have a short walk or whatever. 2 minutes for a short discussion is running right now. So I guess the 2 minutes are almost done. So can we just have some feedback from the audience? What are your thoughts about the difference between an Agile coach or Scrum Master? What do you think? Oh, so many volunteers over there.
We'll start. So we saw the two roles like using actually the same tools or methods to work with teams, but rather different levels of engagement. So we saw the Scrum Master more like acting with a squad or team, or depending on the model that the organization is using. And the Agile Coach more like working towards more teams, helping Scrum Masters sometimes, or doing Agile beyond the team level, spreading it in the organization. But in the end, as methods or practices they use, we consider they are kind of the same.
Okay. Any other opinions in the room?
Maybe except the model behavior of the last words there. Okay. Agile coaching and Agile more than Scrum Master.
So there was also an interesting answer to the "I'm confused" question. Oh, that's not the one I would like to share. I would like to share, where is it right now? Just let me see. Ah, it's here. So there was an answer to it by Alan Hollup. And Alan says, Scrum Masters know about Scrum, we hope, and often little else. Agile coaches are experts on general agility at vastly larger subject. Scrum Masters focus on single teams. Agile coaches can do that, but the focus is often wider on the whole organization. That was kind of interesting. And a colleague of mine, Andreas Schlieb, also a CST and CEC from Germany, replied on this as well. And he said, a Scrum Master is an Agile coach who takes responsibility for the learning and growth of a team, product owner, and organization. Too bad that this leadership approach has been reduced to administrative tasks. And this is something that we found in a lot of different organizations. From my perspective, there is no difference between an Agile coach and a Scrum Master. It's just a different kind of title. And in some situations, the first time I was aware of the title Agile Coach was when a team decided not to do Scrum anymore and they wanted to do Kanban. And in Kanban, there was no such role like a Kanban coach or something. And they said, well, a Scrum Master, we're doing Kanban, so it doesn't make sense. What about calling it a Kanban coach? And then this team said, well, after a time, Kanban is kind of, well, this is kind of hard as well. Let's try to do something else. And they did some other Agile approaches, and then Kanban coach was not fitting anymore. And so they told about Agile coaching. So that was kind of interesting when I go back in time to my experience. So if we focus on something, I would like to ask the question, what is the main responsibility of a Scrum Master and or Agile coach? What do you think? What is the main responsibility?
I believe that the Scrum Master should keep the team on track with the sprint goal and to keep them agile. And the Agile coach should do basically the same thing, but at the organizational level.
And everybody's in a happy environment.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I take a look at the Scrum Guide, in the Scrum Guide there's something that says, as a service to the development team, I said decelopment team, no, I will correct it, development team. It's removing impediments. That's kind of interesting. Removing impediments is one kind of service, but not the only one. And we should be aware of that the Scrum Master is kind of coaching the development team, yes, on one perspective. He or she is coaching the product owner as well, and the whole Scrum team is embedded in an organization. So sometimes the service to the organization is coaching the organization as well. So this is definitely stated in the Scrum Guide. So as I said before, the Scrum Master is an Agile coach. Let's focus on the removing impediments things. It's when I ask students, they always say, well, the main responsibility of a Scrum Master is to remove impediments, each and every one of them. But there is there's a flip side of it. By removing each and every impediment, there is a positive intention, but there is a negative impact. What do you think could be the negative impact by having a Scrum Master removing all the impediments?
Your team members will not be able to resolve the impediments if only one person is always resolving those impediments.
Exactly. So we have an anti-pattern here, which is called Scrum Mom. Scrum Mom is removing all the impediments, but when Scrum Mom is not at home, the team is not able to remove impediments on their own because they never learned about this. And this is the negative impact on removing impediments only. But the sentence is kind of true because the Scrum Master takes care of removing impediments. What kind of? The Scrum Master takes care of those impediments which are outside of the whole Scrum team. So everything that could not be solved by the Scrum team itself should be kind of addressed by the Scrum Master. He is not the only one who's taking care of it. He is the one who's addressing it to the rest of the organization. So there's a good quote by Geoff Watts, who wrote the book Scrum Mastering. A good Scrum Master is not necessary, and a great Scrum Master is not necessary but wanted. So a Scrum Master can become an impediment himself if he is the only one who takes care of something like this. So the Scrum Master should kind of work on the task to become obsolete. So the Scrum Master as a person is not necessary because the whole role of a Scrum Master is taken over by the whole Scrum team. So the Scrum Master is still there, but not as a single person. So here's one question that I find very valuable to the Scrum Master as well. So what was your contribution during the last sprint as a Scrum Master that helped the team and the organization to reach the next stage of the evolution, beside removing impediments? So this is something each and every Scrum Master should ask him or herself at least one time a sprint. So what was your contribution? And here's another message inside, which is kind of interesting. The next stage of the evolution. Therefore, you need to have a kind of an idea how this evolution might look like. So what could it be? What is the next stage of the evolution and how to go there? That's kind of interesting. So what can you do? I would like to show some perspective on Scrum Mastering, and therefore I'm trying out a new thing. I have my iPad here with me, and I try to do screen sharing on my iPad while I'm talking on the other microphone, and I have no idea if this is working. Let's see. So we have something like this. Is it kind of working?
So blank page.
Something blank.
White.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The blank page is left intentionally. So let's try to do something. So we have our Scrum Master, which is kind of nice. And there are several perspectives for a Scrum Master. So there is the Scrum Mastery, which is awesome. So a Scrum Master is a master of Scrum. He or she knows how Scrum works and when Scrum works, when to use Scrum and when not to use Scrum. He is not a process fascist or something like a process police or something. He is someone who can help the team to kind of identify the processes they need and which will work for them. And therefore, he or she has at least 5 perspectives. And this is something what I like to do right now. Ding, 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 ding. It's kind of working. I'm absolutely overwhelmed. Awesome. I can draw remotely. So, so there's one thing. If you find yourself in a situation when you have a very new and fresh team, you should be something like a trainer. A trainer is somebody who is able to deliver knowledge right on the spot. Just prepare a short introduction about maybe Agile estimation or how to use user stories. What is Scrum? What about the different rules? Whatever you have. So this is your perspective from a trainer perspective. So each and every Scrum Master should be an excellent trainer. Okay, but a trainer is only focusing on a very short moment of time. So the next thing is about, what about this evolution thing I talked before? And when it comes to the evolution, there's something like a Scrum Master should also be a mentor. Somebody who has an idea about the further evolution of a team, an individual, or an organization. This is something which is important. And the other thing is, from this perspective, a Scrum Master is something like the expert. Okay, so what do we have on the other side? On the other side, we have something like a Scrum Master is also something like a facilitator. Somebody who is helping the team in tough meetings, in tough situations, just to move forward, to make some progress. And on the other hand, a Scrum Master is also a coach. So what does this kind of fluffy coach means? So where's the difference between the expert level and the one thing that I wrote on the left side? So I have an expert, and on the other hand, I am supporter. And I'm supportive without having an agenda. So as a trainer or a mentor, I have a very concrete agenda in my mind. I know what is the next step of the evolution. I have an idea how to reach this next level, what kind of things can be implemented. As a facilitator or coach, I don't follow an agenda. I know that there's something going on in the room, but I help the team and the rest of the organization by asking questions maybe, or being a mirror or something. So this is more like, I believe in the capability of each individual that they have the solution inside themselves. And they need some kind of guiding questions to uncover the solution. But it's not me providing a solution. And this is the main difference between being a consultant or a coach. I know a lot of consultants nowadays which call themselves, we are agile coaches, but they still provide solutions. And whenever you find yourself by being a solution provider, you are not a coach. Definitely not, because you have an agenda and it's your experience you try to push over the rest of the team. So we have another dimension, which is the one here on the very bottom. As a Scrum Master, you're also something like a conflict navigator. As a conflict navigator, you are not solving conflicts. You are helping the team and the organization to identify, yes, we have a conflict, and yes, it's our conflict, and to name the conflict as well. So what is the main issue, what we have right here, just to decouple it from individuals, like having persons in place or something? Well, my team lead is the impediment or something like this. No, what is the main issue? And then figuring out what can we do about it. Does it make sense, kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, okay. So, so these are at least 5 small perspectives on Scrum Mastering. And what we can do right now, just let me see. It's absolutely amazing, this tool. So, when it comes, so are there any questions so far related to the flip that I've drawn here? Any questions?
What do you think the Scrum Master should be, more on the supportive side or more on the expert side?
That's a very interesting question, a very good question. So when it comes to the perspectives, I think all of the perspectives are valid. And depending on the situation, you need to deal what might be the best perspective I can take over right now. What is helping my team now in the moment? And then you do something like situational leadership. So what is supportive right now in my situation for the team? And what I see a lot of times when it comes to new Scrum Masters, and a lot of times it's more like because they coach 2, 3, or 5 teams, they find themselves in the situation where they see a lot of problems everywhere, and they try to address those problems without asking, is this a real problem or not for the team? And that's kind of interesting, because when I'm a Scrum Master, it's not necessarily a problem because I know it from my past and from my experience. It might be a complete different context. So you have to kind of ask and find out if the problem that you see is really a problem or not. The other thing is, so when those Scrum Masters grow, they find themselves in a situation, well, yeah, you know, I've been a bit too pushy in the past, too solution providing, too prescriptive or whatever. I need to step back because I am a coach. And then we have a lot of passive coaches in the organizations, people which are kind of, well, you know, as a Scrum Master, I don't take decisions because, no, it's given to the team. They have to do it. They have to figure out what is the best way of working and all the other things. But if the maturity level of this team is not high enough, how can they do it? So they need some kind of support. And this is why I say all the different perspectives are valid, but it depends on the situation, what kind of perspective might be the most beneficial ones for the team and for the organization. Does it make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. Anytime.
We have another question here.
Yeah, perfect. Let's go.
I would put that little framework on the corporate context, where our responsibility in the end is to provide some kind of value for the stakeholders, for business. How would you sometimes demonstrate or measure that value when you look at the corporate web through that lenses of the frameworks?
Yeah, that's kind of hard because most of the organizations I know so far, they are kind of, they know how to measure lines of code and code quality and other things. But what about the value of a Scrum Master and or Agile Coach? This is one of the things why I think that as a Scrum Master, I should work with the stakeholders and the organization as well and try to help them to identify what are the benefits we can get out of this. So one of the things we need to do when we start as a Scrum Master is to clarify what is the thing that the management is kind of expecting from my role as a Scrum Master, and to clarify what can they expect and what is nothing they can expect. And what I like to do then is I like to ask the management also, because Scrum and Agile is not for it's not the reason for being itself. There must be an underlying reason why we want to become Agile and why we want to use Scrum. So what is the thing we are able to do when we are agile compared to our current situation? And if we help the organization to clarify this and to come together on a regular basis to reflect on this as well, just to maybe discover new opportunities and maybe new challenges, then it might be that the organization sees some kind of value by having us helping them to realize their current situation and the possibilities that are out there. Does it make kind of sense? But it's there. But we have a different challenge. The other challenge is, so we are agile coaches, and I have no idea about your current situation, but from my experience, a lot of agile coaches and Scrum Masters grow from the IT department, because this is the place where all the things started. This is where the movement starts in a lot of companies. And then we figure out, okay, what can we do about the IT? What about to help them to unleash their full potential? But if we only focus on the IT and not on the whole value stream, we will miss a lot of opportunities. We as Scrum Masters, we can see this, and we want to help the organization to see this as well. So as Scrum Master, we go to other departments and talk about, well, what about Scrum? What about Agile? What about you trying to apply it in your current context as well? And then we have the situation that some people say, well, you know, where do you come from again? You're the IT dude. Well, you know, our business is completely different than yours, and I'm sorry, but you smell like being the machine guy. It's in marketing, we have completely different things, but it's nice that you have been, that you want to help us, but no, thank you. It's just because we're different. And this is kind of weird. So this is one of the issues I see as well in organizations. If you act as a Scrum Master and you come from the IT department, it's hard to kind of convince other departments to try out agility as well. Does anybody know this situation as well? Okay, so sorry.
I saw that as like an opportunity to somehow expand the role, because if you teach the role in somehow by the value that adds, it also brings new opportunities. Like, why not bring teachers from universities or mentors from other companies, like as a Scrum Master? So if I extend that framework to the practices, it will make more sense than for the managers or for the company owners.
Yeah. What about having just parking this question for a little while, because I would like to draw another sketch. Would it be okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. And please just raise your hand. If I don't go back to your question, just shout at me and say, well, Björn, you want to go back to my question? I'm serious about this. So let's see. Okay. So we had some perspective on Scrum Mastering. Here's one thing what you can do in your organization, and it's kind of going in the direction that you mentioned before. A friend of mine who's also a coach just said, well, there are two main drivers, two main motivators for change. And one motivation might be that we want to do things really, really good. And if you ask your organizations, they still agree and they say, yes, for sure, we want to be agile because we want to do things really, really good. But if you take a look at the decisions that they made in their organizations, it might be that it's more addressed like, we want to do things less worse. And this is something that is kind of interesting. So just be aware of what is the motivation of change. Yes, they say they want to do things really good, but what is really the impact, what we have here in the room? And here's another thing I would like to draw. Just a second. I will fetch my iPad again. So here we go. So what I like to do is, when it comes to organizations and to change, in a lot of cases, we have something like So here are some symptoms we have. And what I see in a lot of organizations, organizations see, well, there are some things not going on that good. And what they are doing, they are implementing some practices like Scrum. Let's do Scrum because then we are able to address those symptoms. We are getting better and better. But when I come to those organizations, it doesn't feel like that they are really doing Scrum. It feels more like soulless Scrum, being an environment of the working dead, because people are dancing the Scrum choreography by moving post-it arounds, but that's kind of all. And the interesting thing is, below every practice, there are some principles, and below the principles, we have some values. And when it comes to change, we should not do a change from this perspective. We should try to do it from this perspective by really addressing the values. What are the values? What is the value system inside the organizations? And how are we going to support this? Does it make sense, kind of?
Yeah.
Perfect. And this is kind of hard because a lot of people are not aware of their own value system. And then it's getting interesting because sometimes we have something like corporate values inside an organization, and as a Scrum Master, we might identify that the team values are kind of different to the corporate values. And then we have some reasons for possible conflicts that we might have here. Good. Okay. Here is another thing. Ding, 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 ding. There we go. Okay. So what you can do is, or what I like to do is, I like to do some regular reflections on the Agile Manifesto. Here is something what you can do. Ding, 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 ding. Or have you done some retrospectives on the Agile Manifesto from your perspective? Okay, so what I like to do, I bring the Agile values, how many values do we have there in the Agile Manifesto?
4.
4?
No.
That's interesting. 4, oh, there's Marcella said 4 values. So what we have there, we have 4 value pairs. So it's 8 values, 4 value pairs, and a value pair is composed as a left side and a right side. Any idea what about the different values? What is the content? What is the first Agile value pair? Oh, the chat movies. So what is the first value pair? This one. An idea? So it's individuals and interactions.
Processes and
Yay! Processes and tools. Okay, what's the second one?
Working software.
It's working software. Yes, that's how it's stated in the original. I like to state it working products over comprehensive documentation. Right. So what is the third one? It's about close customer collaboration. Over contract negotiation. And the last one is responding to change over? Yes, following a plan. Da-ding, da-ding, da-ding. So what I like to do is when I'm doing a short workshop with a team or a part of the organization, oh, sorry. I have all the 8 values printed out as 4 pieces of paper and turn them upside down. And the audience have to figure out what are the Agile value pairs that belong together. And it's interesting to listen to the communication and to the discussion which is going on, because then you find out, okay, what is triggering this team to lay out the Agile values a bit differently. Once they have this, which is kind of interesting, I like to do an exercise. Treat the value pairs, like we have something like, what's going on here? So having something like left side is bigger than the right side. And what I like to do then is draw a line below each pair. And then, as a team or as an audience, come together as a group of people and have a consensus. Where are we right now in our organization? Maybe it's something like this. Maybe it's something like this. Maybe something like this. And the interesting thing is, the last value pair is the most schizophrenic one. It's more like people say, yes, for sure, we want to respond to change, but the plan is not allowed to change. That's kind of weird. So we have maybe something like this layout. And what we can do right now then is, as the audience, focus on only one regulator. So what is the thing that we need to change in order to improve our situation, and what is the best thing we can do about it? So maybe they select something like, well, let's go about this one. And what can we do in order to move this from processes and tools to individuals and interactions? Does it make sense? Kind of?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. That's good. The other thing what you can do is, once you've done this with the Agile values, you can also use the 12 principles and have a dialogue in your team where you talk about, let's do some kind of color coding. Let's color all the principles we have in place in green. Let's color all the things that we kind of started, but we can do more about it in yellow. And every principle which is not started yet, let's put it in red. And then figure out the possibility, what can we do in order to keep the greens green? And which are the 2 or 3 things in yellow and red that we want to change, and how can we do something about this? And then you have a short reflection on the Agile Manifesto as well. And this is, in almost every situation I've applied this, kind of very valuable to the rest of the audience. The interesting thing is, we can also talk about inside our organization, what are we doing? Are we cooperating? Are we collaborating? Or co-creating? And what I would like you to do right now, because it's a way too long monologue from my perspective, I would like you to do pairing up with somebody else or building triads and discuss what is the difference between those 3 words. Take 2 minutes, have a short discussion. What do you think is the difference between those 3 words? Cooperation, collaboration, and co-creation. Time is running right now. Go. I think humans are always almost. So it's interesting. The energy level in the room is quite high. So can you share some of your experience? What do you think? What is the difference between cooperation, collaboration, or co-creation? So any idea?
Who wants to share?
I can share the first idea. What we discussed is that the difference between those three is that the level of implication is rising from cooperating to co-creating.
Yes. Okay. Very good approach.
We did semantics. Managed to say all the things that it was shared in the room in a couple of words. So amazing.
So from that perspective, cooperation is something which is kind of motivated externally. So there are different parties, they should kind of cooperate, but they still identify with the single individual, single department. When it comes to collaboration, it's more from an intrinsic perspective. Yes, we need to collaborate, and I go to the party we need to collaborate with. It's more intrinsic, not that much extrinsic motivated. And when it comes to co-creation, it's more like we identify as a whole team and not only as a single department, because we are co-creating something as a huge team. And there you have a difference. So cooperation is extrinsic motivated, collaboration is intrinsic motivated, and co-creation is intrinsic motivated and purpose-driven, because we as a whole team see a purpose in the whole thing that we want to move forward. And this is something we can just try to figure out, what do we have in our organization. What you also can do is reflect to the 5 Scrum values. I hope that all the Scrum Masters in the room know all the Scrum values. What are the 5 Scrum values that we have in place?
Fear.
What was it? What are the 5 values?
Fear. We must drive the teams through fear so that they can deliver.
Oh my gosh.
Are you right that this is a Scrum value?
It's the Romanian version of the Scrum.
Oh, okay. So I see that the dark side is strong on your side. Okay. So we have 5 values. As a Scrum Master, we have courage. We have respect. What are the other 3? Openness. We have something like commitment. And what is the last missing thing?
Focus.
Yay! We have focus. And what we can do is maybe ask ourselves, if you think about the last event you have discussed, how have those values been present in this event? what have you done that the 5 values are present in this event? I would say it would be a nice discussion for about 2 minutes. Find somebody you didn't talk to this evening and discuss what was the last event that you facilitated and how have those values been present or maybe not, and maybe discuss why. Does it make sense? 2 minutes? Go ahead. It would be nice if we come back just to share some of the insights. So what do you think? What maybe 1 or 2 voices from the audience? What about the last event that you facilitated and the values? What do you think about them? Maybe 1 or 2 people just sharing some insights. So many insights in the room. Maybe 1, or maybe I can just rephrase the question. What did you find out about what is the most challenging value to have present in an event? What is the thing that challenged you most?
Well, it's not here.
Okay.
Only Transylvania, it's okay.
We have respect and courage.
Respect and courage is an interesting thing. Yeah. And I see a lot of times focus is also something which is addressed in a lot of events when people are starting to do a lot of things in parallel and, yeah, having their traction in the room and just think about what can I do in order to support that. Focus is way more present in an event. And this is something that you can ask yourself as a Scrum Master as well, because you are doing a service to the development team, you are doing a service to the PO, you're doing a service to the rest of the organization. And whatever kind of event it is, just think about what can you do in order to make those values more present in those events. An interesting thing is that a lot of Scrum Masters I know, when I ask about the 5 values, they are kind of stuck because they don't know them all. So what you can also do is, as a short exercise, you can do something like a sentence. I believe in focus, or I believe in respect, and we show it that by doing something. You can craft something like those sentences of value and have them present in your team spaces or the localization where you run this event. That might be interesting as well. And then you can always come back and say, well, my observation is that we said we believe in respect and we show it by, but I sense a different thing here in the room. What do you think? And that helps people to reflect on this thing as well. So what you can also do is reflect the value of the 5 events. And what I like to do then, just as a short thing. This is something I like to do in retrospectives as well. What I like to do is having a short team radar, and maybe you know this exercise already. We have the 5 events, which is a sprint. We have the planning. We have the daily. We have the review. And we have the retro. And I asked the team about, what do you think? How valuable are those events right now? And we have something like scales from 1 to 10, or 0 to 10, something like this. And I asked them to find a consensus about what do you think about the value right now? And in a lot of cases, it's something like, well, yeah, you know, we have the sprint, and the sprint is kind of, yeah, mid-size. We have planning, which is okay as well. And then we have this daily thingy. Can we do it daily, maybe twice a week? Not daily, maybe? Okay, might be something. Then we have a review, which is also okay. Oh my gosh. And then we have something like this retro whatever, retrospective. And then we have something interesting here. It's something like a spider web. And as a Scrum Master, I try to clarify what is the value, what is the intention of the events, especially when it comes to daily and to retrospective, because these are the least voted events what we have. And what I say as well as a Scrum Master, we don't want to let go of such events, but I ask you, team, what can we do, what should we do differently so that the value of both events is increasing at least 2 steps on this scale. So I'm giving back the authority of the process, how it goes, back to the team. And I turn affected people into involved people so they can contribute as well and just see, okay, what can we do? And I can do this kind of radar as well, not only for the events, I can do it for the roles as well, I can do it for the artifacts, whatever you want to see, whatever you want to do, and wherever you see this discussion might be valuable. And again, the thing what we have here right now, we have something like a spider web, which is kind of nice, and we identify things to do, to change in order to improve the value of things. But the discussion is the most valuable part of it. It's not the result, it's just the discussion. Because then we are doing team sharing and knowledge building. Oh, somebody's making some music, which is kind of nice. Good. Does it make sense, kind of?
It's not here.
No, it was somewhere else, but whatever. It was not on my side, and it's over right now, so it's good. Somebody know, oh, damn it! It was my phone. So let's just move on for a while, only for a short while, because it's late and you want to go to wherever. So doing the reflection. And the other thing what you can do right now is then when it comes to the events, I like that in the Scrum Guide we turned away from ceremonies or something to events. And a lot of people talk about, well, no, it's a meeting. And from my perspective, there's a difference between a meeting and an event. And I would like you to think about, just take this question for yourself and just think about, well, what is the difference between a meeting and an event? And what is necessary to turn in a meeting into an event? So what makes it an event? Just as a short question. Well, perfect. So let's go back to the perspectives. Let's go back to the perspectives. Let me see. Oh, whiteboard. So as I said before, we have the Scrum Master. we have the perspectives, like being a trainer, being a mentor, being a facilitator, being a coach, being a master of Scrum, and being a conflict navigator. What you can do with those perspectives, just take them and ask yourself, on what degree I am doing this. So if you find yourself in a perspective that you say, well, yeah, I'm a very good facilitator, I'm kind of here, and I have kind of an idea how to help my team to grow, but I'm not a good trainer, and I'm definitely not a coach, then you find areas where you want to grow or where you can grow, and you can ask yourself, what can I do in order to grow in those areas as well, and what might be the perspective that is the most valuable for my team as well, just as a short idea. What you can do as well then is, when it comes to impediments, what I like to do is, I like to have a short discussion about impediments with the rest of the organization and with the rest of the team, especially with the development team and the product owner. And I talk about impact, and I talk about influence. And then I have a 2x2 matrix. And when it comes to the perspective of, well, as a team, we find some impediments which are here in this area, and we have some impediments which are in this area, and some impediments in this area, and some impediments in this area. This area here, this belongs to the dev team and the PO, because they have a huge influence on those things, and it has a huge impact. All the things which have a huge impact, but which are those are out of control of the team, this is something I can take care of as a Scrum Master, and I need to put it to the rest of the organization and find other people who can do something about it. When it comes to the things with huge influence, we can influence it on our side as a team. With less impact, we can do it as well as a dev team and PO. And the things which have less impact and less influence, this is something you should avoid. Something like this. Does it make sense, kind of?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Oh, you are still awake. That's good. That's good. Awesome. Well, and I think, at least from my perspective, when it comes to unleashing your full potential of yourself as a Scrum Master, the most important thing is being self-aware. Being self-aware about your role, about your responsibility, about what can you do, and what are the things you are not able to do right now, and what can you do about this. Just having the different perspectives, having the different ways of reflection, what I mentioned here before, having the scale of influence and impact, and also for you as a Scrum Master, maybe you find yourself not in the position that you can just influence people from the outer organization. Just doing something about this. Does it make sense, kind of? So really being self-aware, and just ask yourself the one question that I raised before, and I will just, I will put it on screen again. So from my perspective, the most important question as a Scrum Master, it's this one. What was your contribution as a Scrum Master that helped the team and the organization to reach the next stage of their evolution, beside removing impediments? Just make a short diary or a journal or something like this, and just reflect. What is the thing that you learned today? What is the most valuable thing you learned today? What is something that you have not been aware of so far? Something like this. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Perfect. So, I'm sorry, I just interrupted this beautiful screen blah. So from my perspective, I shared all the things that I would like to share with you, and I would like to thank you for your time and for being here. And if you have any further questions that we are not able to address within the next minutes, feel free just to get in touch with me. My email address is bjorn@jensen.coach, as you see there. And Amir and the other ones can just share my email address as well. So if you have anything you would like to know, you would like to share or whatever, feel free to get in touch. That's from my perspective. And now we have time enough for question and answers. Could something related to the topic, could also be something completely unrelated to the topic. You can raise the question. I'm not sure if I can answer all the questions, but I will try to give my very best. So, just feel free to raise your voice.
What kind of backgrounds do you think Scrum Master should have?
Oh, so what kind of background should a Scrum Master have?
From your perspective.
Yeah, so there are different things what you can do. When it comes to the trainer perspective, it's I like to have something which is not that much slide-based, which is more interaction-based or something, like doing something like an education by reading Sharon Bowman's book, Training from the Back of the Room or something, make yourself comfortable with such concepts. This is kind of valuable. Just how to organize a training, how to organize a session, a workshop, whatever, and ask yourself about the choreography. So what is the input of this workshop, and what is the thing I would like them to explore and to take away? Because this is your responsibility as a trainer and a workshop facilitator, so to say. So this is from the trainer perspective. And for sure, you need to have some kind of knowledge in this expert domain. It should be nice. It is nice if you are something like a Scrum expert and you're doing a Scrum training. If you ever attended a Scrum training facilitated by somebody who has absolutely no clue about Scrum, that's kind of interesting. So when it comes to the mentoring thing, I think the most important thing for a mentor is experience, being experienced as somebody in this field. When it comes to the facilitator, yeah, just ask yourself about your facilitation qualities. What are you doing for moderating a workshop? And what about your ability to get yourself out of your way? Because it's about the attendees and not about you. And when it comes to coaching perspectives, I would highly suggest just diving into some kind of the coaching educations that we have out there, like coactive coaching or solution focus or systemic or something like this. This is kind of very valuable for at least all the coaches I know so far. At least if you want to go into the direction of becoming a certified team coach. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense, kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. And I miss two perspectives. I miss the Scrum Mastery. When it comes to the Scrum Mastery perspective, so what I'm doing when I'm acting as a Scrum Master, I really am doing journaling. And I wrote down some questions. I'm not doing it all day long, but at least every second day. And I tried to write down some observations I made, some kind of about the reactions on myself, some things that I was not aware of, and other things. Just having a short thing just to make me think, to reflect the days. And when it comes to the conflict navigator, that's a tough one. Becoming a very good conflict navigator is kind of, you need to be confident that you can stand with a conflict and also be aware of what kind of conflict is it. And some kind of conflicts are way too tough that we as a Scrum Master can just do something about it. Then we have other people just to talk to, because there are other experts, and a lot of them are in the HR departments. Just go to them and ask for support. What is their suggestion? That might be another thing what you can do. Does it make sense?
Yeah. So you are a developer, right? Was it easy for you to become a Scrum Master?
From my perspective right now, I would say yes, for sure. When I go back in time, I still love code, and I love coding. And when I find myself in a situation, when I see people working on a very good product, I would like to dive into the source code and see what's going on there. But I found myself in a situation in my first Scrum transition back in 2005, when I was acting as a developer, and I was still, I would like to code, and I was coding with the team, and I was acting as a Scrum Master on the other side. So Scrum Master and developer, Scrum Master and developer. And that was kind of very time consuming and confusing also for the rest of the team. And I found myself that it was more like slowing down the progress, because I tried to do some coding, but I was also focusing on removing impediments and other things. So in a retrospectives, one of the retrospectives, we say, well, Björn, it's kind of nice that you want to code, but can you please stop this? Because we want to really do like fulfilling something. We want to reach our commitment, but we cannot rely on you. And it was kind of hard for me. And I asked myself, okay, I still love coding, but I can see the situation that the team is in. So what can I do differently? And then I focused myself on providing an environment which is kind of supporting a safe-to-fail environment. So I focused on continuous integration environment. I focused on build servers and other things. So I don't code on productive code for the product, but I was kind of creating the supporting development environment. And that was kind of supporting for the team as well.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, there's one question on the chat. But where is it now? Yeah. How do you keep yourself out of coding together with the team? So nowadays I try to really not dive into source code when I'm coaching a team. So I try to do something else, and there are a lot of things to do. The switch from product source code into infrastructure source code was kind of nice-ish. It was kind of, well, I'm still into coding, but I still was keeping away this capability from the rest of the team, because I was taking over. And so I was more like helping team just to do it on their own. I'm trying to educate them and to help them just to grow in this position, even if I don't know all the things. So I help them to just to grow. Does it make sense, kind of? There was kind of Adi? Okay, perfect. So any other question?
We have 2 more questions in the room.
One is about mixing the roles. So what do you think about the Scrum Master just also managing the people and also product owner at the same time?
Oh, mixing the roles. Mixing the roles is always a tough thing. It's definitely not recommended. It's not impossible to mix roles, but I see it way more times failing instead of compared to being successful. And even when I'm successful mixing some roles, it's kind of confusing the roles, and people from the outside doesn't see what kind of role is acting here right now. So it's kind of confusing. The other thing is when it comes to the role thing, I see it a lot of times that the Scrum Master is part of the development team. This is something I see a lot of times, which we discussed just before. The other thing is product owner being part of the development team, oh, that's kind of interesting. So because we have different responsibilities, the product owner should take care of, are we building the right product? And the development team should take care of, are we building the product right? So we have outer quality and inner quality. The product owner says what, and the development team says how. If the product owner is part of the development team, it might lead to the situation that the product owner is also taking over responsibility about the how. And so he is kind of reducing the self-organization of the team. That's kind of impacting. And the other thing is about when it comes to the mixing of the roles Scrum Master and product owner, which is kind of interesting because that's very schizophrenic. The product owner says, well, we want to create as much business value as possible by end of the sprint. Now let's move. And the Scrum Master says, well, yeah, but it would be nice if we take some time to learn. And this is kind of very schizophrenic. I've seen this in practice, I would say 4 times in 18 years, and many hundred times being unsuccessful in 18 years as well. So mixing is not impossible, but it's very hard, very tough, and it's definitely not recommended. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So what else?
We have a question online.
I'm sorry?
We have a question online.
Ah. Oh, can a product owner be also an architect? Oh, the dark side is strong in this one. Can the product owner be an architect? If the product owner is an architect, he is also taking care of the how and not about the what. I would definitely not suggest something like this. An architect should be part of the development team because he knows about the architecture. And you do not know the power of the dark side. Oh, the chat is nice. An architect should be part of the development team. And because a development team is not a software development team, it's a product development team. So each and every capability that is necessary in order to craft a product, to qualify it, and to run it should be inside this team. Otherwise, we have some kind of dependencies to other teams as well. Okay, so then we have a challenge in most organizations because they say, well, what can we do then about architectural integrity so that we have an overall architecture? Some people say, well, then we need an architecture board for this. This is kind of creating a new hierarchy. What I would recommend is having a community of practice for people who are interested in architecture. And they should meet up on a regular basis just to share what the teams are trying out, what they should do the next time. And then we have something like a common alignment about the overall architecture, and we have architectural knowledge inside the teams, which is way better. This is kind of relying to the principle which is coming from the pragmatic programming framework, which is called eat your own dog food. And this is kind of what I highly recommend here. Does it make sense? Okay.
Okay, another question in the room.
I have another one. I think it's also in the area of software development more than Scrum as a process. So maybe it's a bit harder for me to formulate it. I see Scrum in the original definition as a way of solving complex problems. So we had complex problems that became easier and simpler to resolve with continuous integration tools. But how are we relearning to use Scrum for its purpose when the systems are becoming more and more complex? We have even new technologies that are coming. You can no longer formulate user stories with mockups because you have designed chatbots and interactive systems. And so how would you go back to the basics of Scrum and do all the relearning?
Yeah. So from my perspective, when I started with Scrum, I was also treating Scrum as a framework to solve complex problems. What I like to do nowadays is to to treat it from a different perspective. I like to see Scrum as a framework to relearn collaboration and co-creation and to relearn learning. Because this is what we are doing here. When we have something like sprints, a sprint is something where we want to learn something. And when we come to the area of complexity, I think everybody of you is familiar with the Stacy matrix, right?
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Are you familiar with the Stacy matrix?
Stacy matrix.
Should I draw it as a sketch?
You can please draw it, yeah.
Just so I need to just a second. I have my beautiful iPad. So when it comes to Stacy, in Stacy it's kind of interesting because in Stacy we have something like we have two dimensions here. We have this thing about requirements, or the what, and we have the thing about the implementation, or the how. And when it comes to the question about when we are starting up a product development, all people say, well, yes, you know, we are very clear about what we want to do. And we need something like a project plan or whatever. And then something like life happens. So it might be that we thought, yes, we know each and everything, but it turns out in the end that we need to do some changes, some new requirements, or we need to use different technologies, whatever. And so it's getting more and more unclear on one or the other directions, or on both. And Stacy just called this environment in this corner, this is something he called simple. Because when it comes to the simple environment, the relationship between knowledge and things we don't know is very much on the we know everything side. This is the area where we have traditional management and other things. We can predict something, we can execute a plan, and there's a high possibility that everything goes exactly in this direction. Okay, but then we have something like this. And the second area is when you, let's compare it with Facebook. If you have the status of relationship in Facebook, this area would say, oh my gosh, it's complicated. Maybe you know this. And it's, why is it complicated? It's complicated because the relationship from knowledge and things we don't know is moving. It's not that far on the knowledge side. We have some variables in here which are kind of uncertain. And the symptom is that the project plan is changing. And this leads to the situation that a lot of people say, well, damn it, Björn, we hired you as the senior project manager, and now the plan is changing. So, okay, we have a different thing here, which is called complex. And in the complex environment, the relationship is moving from knowledge towards what we don't know. So there are a lot of things in here that are influencing the result, whatever is coming out. And we don't have, there's no control about it. And this is the area where all the Agile frameworks and all the Agile methodologies are unleashing their full potential. This is the complex environment. There's a high possibility of change in how and what, or maybe only one of those. And then we have something like this. Any idea how we call this? The last area? What was it?
Chaotic.
Yeah, this is called chaos. And in chaos, we have other methodologies which are unleashing their full potential. Something like design thinking, service design, or lean startup. And the interesting thing is, when you take a look about Scrum and you take this Stacy matrix into account, you can derive something out of this Stacy matrix for your Scrum implementation. Because what you can say is, the more we don't know, the shorter the sprint. Because you want to learn fast. And this is something we should keep in mind. Does it make sense? Oh, sorry. I changed orientation. Ding, 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 ding. Does it make sense so far? I think you know all the Stacy metrics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I tell you boring stuff. That's not good.
Good reminder. And again, how do you demonstrate the value added by the Scrum Master by demonstrating that you actually have a complex product that you're working with? So now I'm getting back to my original question.
Thanks for reminding me. What I like to try is to help them to realize that we have something like a complex environment. If I need to kind of just argue that I need to be there, then people are not aware of the whole potential and the whole possibilities. So it's not about me just being an advocate of, well, I'm important because of role. It's more like, just being somebody who is inspiring the rest of the organization. So I cannot change people, but I can inspire them. And what I like to do is just trying to inspire people that they see, well, okay, yeah, that's good. So we need to go there. And the more a company is in the mode of, we want to change, we want to drive change, the more they are aware of, it's important to have a role that is taking care of change, because change is not easy. If you find yourself in a situation where you need to argue, well, yes, I am a Scrum Master, and well, Scrum Master is a full-time job, and people say, well, really? And what you can do is just show the different perspectives. Show 5 perspectives and ask about, well, what do you think about this perspectives? How much time do they need? How much time is needed to help a team grow? Because helping a team grow means that I already have an understanding about where the team is currently. And if I don't have this understanding, I need to spend some time with the team. And when you find yourself in a situation where it comes to the situation that we have something like, well, yes, I am Scrum Master for 5 teams in parallel, and then you can just ask yourself, okay, so how much time do you spend where? In most cases, it's more like, well, yeah, you know, I'm facilitating meetings all day long, but I'm not acting as a coach, and I'm not helping people to grow. So this is something, and there are some things you can keep in mind. If you have an organization where people mostly argue about the cost and not about what are we able to invest, what do we want to invest. So if people are not talking about investment, they're only talking about costs, then it's then it might be that they see the Scrum Master as something like a project manager who wants the people to deliver the right thing at the right time. It's your responsibility to drive the agile process. And that's kind of weird. Does it make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
It was, I know it was still a fluffy answer and not a concrete metrics. What you can do is, there are some nice blog posts about what is the value of an agile, or what is the value of a Scrum Master, and how can we demonstrate it. And there are some other things about agile metrics in action. This is something you might want to keep in mind as well, just to have a short look at. But for me, the most important things that I use when it comes to the to being a Scrum Master or an Agile Coach helping the organization to reflect on the mindset, what we have and what they have, and figure out what are the main challenges addressed by what we have in the Agile Manifesto. What I do is a lot of times I'm removing the word Agile out of the Agile Manifesto, only talking about values and principles and asking them, what do you think about those? And what is valuable for you? What is not valuable? And is there something you might want to rephrase? Why? And what would be the new phrase look like? Just to get an understanding about what is going on in this organization. And talking about value systems as well, this is always a favorite for me. Does it make sense?
I think my takeaway was more like asking myself, is the project still complex? Is the project still in the area of uncertainty? And if yes, I can contribute more. I should be honest with myself and move to the next projects and things like that, or leave someone behind. So this is my takeaway.
Yeah, I like what you said about your takeaway. Let me just rephrase it a bit more. It's good if you realize, is this a complex product or not? And what can I do to contribute about it? So first of all, realizing, do we have product thinking mindset or project thinking mindset, which is completely different? And then find yourself, is it you as a Scrum Master who need to realize that we have a complex environment, or is it your task to help others to realize and to be honest about the complexity of our development? And it's not about that you are the one who should be realizing, well, this is complex, help others to see it.
I see my role as the simplifier of the complexity. So
if this is possible.
This is why I bring the framework there to somehow simplify the complexity and have some boundaries on that. But I think that's on more the philosophical part on how we see our responsibilities.
As I said, I would say as long as you can just start as a simplifier, but it would be perfect if you would enable others to simplify as well. And if they simplify way better than you did, then you did a perfect job.
Thanks.
Does it make sense, kind of?
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. One more question.
I have a question, and I'm asking you from your experience. In an organization, is it healthy to have the Scrum Master role shared by the team in rotation? Let's say a person from the team is a Scrum Master for a sprint or two, and then another person have this role.
So the question is it healthy to be a Scrum Master for two teams or more, right?
No, the same team. Because in my organization, I can give an example, half of the teams have a Scrum Master all the time, and some of the teams have a Scrum Master by rotation, we say.
Okay.
This role,
I see.
but everyone is doing it.
So when I'm acting as a Scrum Master, I try to enable the team to take over the Scrum Master role as well. So more acting as a tandem, where I, being in the very beginning, a very active Scrum Master, and then others taking over moderation of daily or planning or whatever. And this could be also something like by rotation. And this is something I like to have, because then I see people care. If rotation is based on volunteering, if it's based on forcing others to take over the role because I have not the capacity in this sprint because of whatever, then it's kind of toxic. And this is something I would not recommend. So it could work. It need to be treated carefully, and then it would be good if there's somebody who helps the team to reflect on the situation, if this is positive for them or not, if this is valuable or not. But in general, there's no yes or no side to this question. It could work. I've seen this, and I suggested it in several environments as well, and it worked out finally in the end pretty well. Sometimes it was kind of, it was more like, damn it, I would like to do the Scrum Master, but I have so much back-end development to do right now in the sprint. Can somebody else take it over? And then we have something like the challenge being a developer and the Scrum Master at the same time. And it's only fixing a symptom. It's not only having a good solution in place. Does it make sense? Okay. That's from my side, I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much, Björn. I would like to remind the guys at home that they can also share their video and they can talk, not only write.
Yes.
So let's give a round of applause to Björn.
And I'm looking forward to the next time.
We are looking too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye then.
Bye-bye.
Okay, sure.